The views, opinions, and experiences shared in this episode belong to the guest and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs of the SwagAbility Show or our sponsors and partners. The information discussed is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical or personal advice. Before making any changes to your health, habits, or lifestyle, please consult a qualified healthcare professional or your doctor. Enjoy the show. North Americans are pouring hundreds of millions of cups of coffee. In the United States alone, people drink about 400 million cups of coffee every single day. That's about 146 billion cups in a year. Today on the SwagAbility Show, we're sitting down with Steve Frazier, entrepreneur, coach, and author of Release the Coffee Cuffs, a man who broke up with coffee and discovered that caffeine wasn't giving him his energy, it was stealing it. Steve, thanks for taking some time to hang out with us on the SwagAbility Show. Really
It is
appreciate you.
it is my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. Great topic. Enjoyed talking to you earlier in our pre-interview. It's just fascinating. And so I'm not here to tell people what to do, but I think knowledge is power, and people can make decisions. So I thought you'd be a great fit for this topic about caffeine. Um, when you look at the role it plays in homes, schools, I even think like teenagers now with energy drinks and things. How would you describe North American, I guess even European, but our culture with regards to dependence?
Through my research, writing the book, coaching, doing tens and tens and tens of podcasts, everybody's drinking caffeine. and, and nobody wants to know if there's they don't want to know if there's a side effect. I did a podcast with a college girl, and she admitted to me that she didn't know one person that didn't drink caffeine. And she did say that she would reevaluate, because I'm here, just as you just said, I am not here to tell anybody to quit caffeine. I'm not anti-caffeine, neither is my book. I am pro health and I'm pro knowledge, and I believe that if people have the correct information, they then can make good choices on their health.
Mm. That leads to my next question, though, is like um, when people don't realize their daily cup may be influencing more than just their alertness, what else does caffeine, what role does it play in a person's body other than, well, some would drink it for taste, I'm sure. But a lot of people, when I was even teaching at college, it was there for mental acuity and alertness.
Yeah.
What else? What else goes on in the body?
Well, I'm going to talk for a long time now, possibly a couple hours. And so you just need to stop me. Okay.
All right, you
so
run with it.
so here's what happens. And this happens every time you drink or consume caffeine, because caffeine is in medications, caffeine is in chocolate. Okay. And one thing, I'm going to, I already said I'm not anti caffeine. A lot of the things that I talk about here, there's always exceptions. And so realize that we all process caffeine differently. And so at some point, you and I could have the same cup of coffee and one of us catches a buzz and one of us doesn't, okay? Because it's our liver. It's an enzyme in our livers. It is called CPY1A2. And we're going to get to that later in depth. But so what happens? Okay, I'm not on caffeine. I was a chronic caffeine user for 30 years.
What's
And then
chronic mean for you?
chronic is I drink I
Like how much?
drink a lot of caffeine. Okay, I mean we're okay in something you can relate to, because at the time there was no energy drinks back when I was doing this. So I was drinking probably a pot of coffee, two or three, four cappuccinos, the big 20 ounces, from the gas stations, and so I'm guessing I was probably at 1,000 milligrams of
And was
caffeine.
that through getting your background? Like I know there's those that drive long haul truck and things like that. What was your, if you don't mind me asking, your occupation
I was
when
in
you
the
were
restaurant.
taking
I
that?
was in the restaurant business,
Okay.
and we had a bar. We had bars in our restaurants. So I used caffeine to stay awake at night, and I would have a tequila and a beer to go to sleep at night. Uh, so it's a vicious cycle,
Mm.
and anybody that's listening to this can relate to this, because what happens when you drink caffeine, three things happen. It doesn't matter who you are. Okay. First of all, it gives you a cortisol boost. Okay. Because that's your adrenal glands. And so the caffeine goes right to your adrenals and says, oh, he's in a state of fight or flight. And so I need to put more cortisol. Now realize cortisol is a stress hormone, and cortisol is what your natural body uses to get you awake in the morning and then to keep you going throughout the day until the cortisol wears off and then melatonin and adenosine pick up. So that's the first thing that happens when you drink caffeine. The second thing is you get a dopamine hit. And dopamine is a natural high. Now, that's also produced in the adrenals, but also in other parts of your body, and particularly in your brain. And you get, and dopamine is a wonderful thing because it makes you feel good. Okay. You want to be on dopamine. The problem is if you're on it all the time, it's not a good thing. Okay. Because it's not real. Okay. It's just like being on a drug. And then the third thing is that you get an adrenaline hit because the caffeine goes to your adrenal glands, and once again it is signaling to your body that you are in fight or flight, and that's just the way it is. You can't stop that. So what happens then is the adrenaline uh, makes you more alert, and then it pumps glucose into your muscles, because remember, you're going to be in a fight or flight situation, so you need that energy, right? And so you see a lot of people that work out, they take pre-workout drinks that have a lot of caffeine in them, which then pumps up their adrenaline, which then makes them get personal records, which ultimately aren't real, because this is all made up. Okay. I'm sorry if I burst somebody's bubble here. I've had this conversation with my daughter. She works out, she goes to the gym. They all got these 20-ounce bottles with all this pre-workout mix. And I looked at her one time and I said, you do realize that this isn't real? And she said, Dad, nobody cares. If they can yell over across to the other side of the gym, hey, I just got a personal record, nobody cares that how much caffeine you drank or other natural or not natural substance you did to get it. So what happens when the adrenaline hits the glucose or hits your muscles with the glucose and you don't use it because you're not in fight or flight? Let's say you're at the kitchen table. Let's say you're at your desk at work, or you're just at a coffee break. All of a sudden you've got all this sugar in your system and you're not using it because it's there to be used to fight somebody or to run away. So what happens then is your blood sugar spikes. Then what is that body's natural reaction? And that is to your pancreas is going to put insulin into your body to bring your blood sugar down. Now, I'm very familiar with this because my youngest son is type 1 diabetic, has been for 24 years. His pancreas died when he was 15. And so at that time, every time he ate a carb, we had to give him insulin because that's the deal. We were his pancreas. Now he's got a pump. He just pumps it in as he eats carbs. He's got to count carbs. But what
So,
is this? Go
sorry.
ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, you've got such a grand knowledge because I know you've studied this and such a passion for it. What was it in Steve's life that drove him to the rabbit hole of what is caffeine doing? Did you have was there a medical issue? Was there, uh, what drove you to if you
Yeah.
don't mind me asking,
Oh
what
no.
got you onto this?
My first one was 13 years ago, and it happened in the car. I was having palpitations, I thought I was having a heart attack.
Okay.
And so I turned around, I called my wife. I didn't go to the emergency room. I called my wife and said, "You need to take me to the emergency room." Realized if I was having a heart attack, I'd have been probably died in the car. But so she takes me to the emergency room. They hook me up on an EKG, and they're watching, and you realize I can feel these, and it feels like my heart's jumping out of my chest. And every time this happens, the EKG machine goes way up. And so the doctor comes in and he said, first thing is, you're going to be fine. You're not having a heart attack and you're not going to die. I said, well, thank you very much. I said, so what's going on? He said, well, you are having something called premature ventricular contractions. They're called PVCs. And these are common in people that drink caffeine. Now, I happen to be very sensitive to them. And he told me this. He said, you're very sensitive, so you can actually feel them. You're not in the majority. I'm in the minority because I can feel them. But everybody gets them. I had this experience several times before, but not to this level. And so I said, what causes this? And he said, well, stress. And then he paused and then he smiled a little bit and he said, and caffeine. And I looked at him. I said, "Oh wow," because I had been in the car. I was loading up on caffeine. I was up for a 12-hour day, 3 hours driving, 6 hours demoing in a natural health co-op, and then 3 hours back. So I would drink coffee all the way there. I would drink energy drinks during the day to stay awake, and so I wouldn't fall asleep at night driving home. So after I left the hospital that day, I quit. I just quit, and like every good addict, I thought I had it under control. So several years later, I started again. Just once, twice, and pretty soon it was every day. Pretty soon it was all the time. And 2 years ago, I finally just quit. I quit cold turkey, and I don't recommend that because it's painful. I had a headache for 3 days, a searing headache for 3 days, brain fog, fatigue. And that is the reason you get a headache when you quit caffeine is the adenosine. You have adenosine receptors in your brain, and that's what naturally puts you to sleep at night. Now, in your natural circadian rhythm, your cortisol goes up in the morning and then it fades, and then your adenosine and your melatonin go up at night, and that's what puts you to sleep. Well, the caffeine molecule plugs those.
So when people say, "I need caffeine for energy or to keep me alert," what's really happening in their body? What's their body really saying to them that
Their
they're reading into, "I need a coffee"?
their adenosine receptors are starting to open up, and and then so what happens then? The adenosine actually is going into them. And so what's happening, because naturally adenosine makes you tired because it puts you to sleep at night. So you'll find that people that don't have coffee in the middle of the afternoon and they have that crash, many of them take a nap. Okay. But your body is definitely signaling the fact that you are tired and you need more caffeine. And it's a vicious cycle. It never ends.
What are some of the misconceptions you think that you hear about, caffeine and productivity for you, the bean or whatever? I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Right. Well, everybody says, well, I'm much sharper. I think better. I think clearer. And this is false. They perceive that because they're in their own little caffeine world. Caffeine, adrenaline, cortisol, dopamine activated world. Okay. There are a number of studies that show that like college students or students in general are not more productive when they're on caffeine. In fact, they get lower test scores if they cram with caffeine. And so it comes down to the fact that when you take the caffeine, you are borrowing energy from later in the day or from tomorrow because you're stealing it because it's false. It's not real energy. The only way you get real energy is to wake up in the morning, look at the sun, and boost your cortisol. And your cortisol says, wow, I'm ready to go. I'm going to do this. Now, that's how you feel whenever you drink caffeine. The problem is that goes away. And the cortisol, your natural circadian rhythm, does not go away. I mean, even though your cortisol, like me, I don't drink caffeine now. So I have a lot of energy in the morning, but I also have energy all day and into early evening. And then I start to get tired. My best, most productive time of the day is not at 8 o'clock at night because my body is now putting me to sleep.
Because you use the phrase, I think I've heard you use it, wired but worn out is how you felt.
Yep.
what is caffeine doing then to our central or our nervous system, adrenal glands, and even stress hormones if with that sentence wired but worn out?
It is keeping you mentally awake and what you perceive as alert, because you're only reaching a baseline. If you're drinking this much caffeine, you're not getting the buzz anymore. You're just getting to a baseline. And but your body says, I want to sleep, but your brain says, I'm wired. I just got this caffeine. Now, ironically, your brain actually increases and produces more adenosine receptors. The more caffeine you drink, the more adenosine receptors are going to go into your brain. And why is that? It's because your body is saying, I want to sleep. And the only way I'm going to sleep is if I get adenosine. And so he's already plugging up the ones. Now we're just talking about me. We'll just say that's me. Okay, Steve, you are plugging all your adenosine receptors. So my brain says, I'm going to produce some more. And so as they produce more, then you become tired because now this is real adenosine going into the adenosine receptors, not caffeine. So what do you do as a result is you drink more caffeine to fill all of the adenosine receptors. And so now you're really wired. Now, with that being said, it seems to me like the logical conclusion here might be, well, how in the world can I sleep then? Well, all you guys that are drinking caffeine, you're sleeping, and I know you are. Okay, and I don't discount that, and I don't argue with you. However, what's the quality of your sleep? Because when you mess with your circadian rhythm, you have 4 stages of sleep in your sleep cycle. The first one is where you just drowse off. You drowsy, you just go to sleep. That's 5%. Your second one is your second stage. It's 40%, and you're doing a little bit of activity in your brain. Uh, you might dream a tad, but it's more of a just you're just there. You're just subconscious. You're unconscious. But when you get into the third one, this is a big deal because the third stage of sleep is where you heal. And this is where men produce testosterone, where women produce estrogen, where your body actually heals the muscles. Now, when your circadian rhythm is disrupted, what happens is that third stage is activated not as fast, and it is also shortened. And so stage two increases. Now,
What ab what about
and
anxiety? Sorry, I'm
I
jumping
just
around
I
on you
just
there.
want I want to get to
Go ahead.
stage four. I want to get to stage four because that directly goes
Yeah,
to your question. So
right.
stage four is where you have REM sleep, rapid eye movement. You
Mhm,
dream. Your brain, your subconscious might be doing some repairs in your brain. Now that stage is also not activated as soon, and it's also shortened. So this cycle happens 4 to 6 times a night. So what happens when you wake up? You're tired because you didn't. And so what's the first thing you do? You go and have more caffeine, right?
mhm.
And what does that do? It makes you anxious. It makes you nervous because realize when you drink caffeine on an empty stomach first thing in the morning, you're getting this massive boost of cortisol, this massive boost of adrenaline. These are stress hormones. Now, what does that do to your anxiety and your
Yeah,
nervousness? It
yeah.
shoots it through the roof,
Mm.
right? Because
I'm not a coffee drinker, so
no,
this is foreign to me.
right,
Not just we've never had a taste for it even when I
right.
was in school, so it's
Good for
foreign
you.
to me.
I
Yeah.
and good for you. You
Mm,
you don't. I'm drinking coffee. Okay, it's decaf. It's organic decaf Swiss water processed,
mm,
which takes out 99%, over 99% of the caffeine. Got all the good stuff. There's no chemicals. It's processed with water, so there's no chemicals to take the caffeine out. So when you drink regular caffeine at any time of the day, you get those stress hormones. And what does it do? It increases your anxiety, increases your nervousness because you're in a fight or flight. And it's real. Your brain thinks it's real. Now your body knows it's not real, and then we go back to that glucose thing and those other effects. You can actually get what's called a cortisol belly. Doesn't matter how healthy you are, because when you get excess cortisol in your body, you actually get a tube around your belly.
Mm.
That's where it goes.
You've mentioned too that caffeine, I think you said, impacts women and men differently. May I ask how so?
Sure. Well, first, what it does to both is it increases your blood pressure because your heart's beating faster. Okay, but for men, cortisol and testosterone do not get along. The more cortisol you have in your body as a man, the least testosterone you're going to have. Now, this isn't good. You need testosterone for your muscles, for your libido, for quality sperm, for conception, all these kind of things. So, the only time that you have an increase in testosterone if you're on caffeine is when you work out. And so what happens is you take the pre-workout drink, you go and you're lifting, you're getting all these personal records. When that happens, your testosterone actually goes up a little bit. However, when you come down, the cortisol is still there and the testosterone goes away. And so you get less and less testosterone. So you have less and less your muscles ability to build them and keep them healthy. And it has a big impact on a man's sperm. It affects the motility and the mobility. And so now we'll flip over to the how does this affect women's side? I realize women have a lot more hormonal stuff going on. It's just the way it is. That's natural. So they're already kind of nervousy people. Many of them are. I don't know if that's a word. I just made it up, but you understand they have a little more anxiety. So now pour some extra stress hormones on there, right? Give me a little more adrenaline. Give me a little more cortisol. Okay, and all of a sudden, this woman is wired, man. I mean, she's anxious. She's nervous. Now, here's a fun fact to know and tell. During a women's menstrual cycle, she processes caffeine significantly different in different phases of her cycle. So in the luteal phase, which is the 14 to 28 days right before her period, she processes caffeine 70% slower. So normal half-life of caffeine is 5 to 8 hours. So now the half-life is 8 to 12. So that woman, if she's in that phase of her cycle, and that's because of the estrogen that's going into her body from her cycle. Now, this also happens with birth control pills. That's every day because birth control pills increase their estrogen. So what happens is if a woman is in that phase of her cycle and she drinks a normal cup of coffee at noon, which is probably 100 to 150 milligrams, that means that at 10 o'clock at night, half of that is still active.
Have there been studies or any medical things, or I want to ask you about people in medicine and what you're talking about, but has there been any looking into the effects of caffeine during pregnancy, and is there any effect on the infant because of caffeine? I, I have no idea. I'm just throwing the question out there. Or maybe that's
Well,
something I've not studied.
I just happen to say that I've studied it is an understatement.
Okay.
Okay, it actually is my micro mission. My mission is to spread information to people. Do you know someone that might have some of these side effects, right? Okay, my micro mission, and really this is my mission. I have this right here. I don't know if you can see what this is. This is a fetus. Okay, now you and I have free will and free won't. So you and I get to choose what goes in our bodies and what doesn't, as well as the 8.5 billion people. Generally speaking, again, there's always exceptions. Okay. The fetus is completely reliant on mom. And so caffeine crosses the placental barrier, crosses the blood brain barrier. Now we're going to go back to this enzyme I talked about, the CPY1A2. And there's no quiz on this, okay? But it's a big deal
Mm.
because that enzyme processes 95% of the caffeine through our livers. In babies, do not develop this enzyme until they're 3 to 6 months old, and they don't get to adult levels until they're 1 to 2 years old. So, with that being said, when mom drinks caffeine, it goes directly into the fetus, and the fetus cannot process it. So, it stays in the fat cells, also closes down the adenosine receptors, which are used to communicate growth and things like that. So, and these are all in my book. I'm not making this up. Okay. Every once in a while, you're going to hear my opinion. My opinion is pregnant women should not drink caffeine. How's that? I can't say it any blunter. Okay. That's my opinion. I can't make anybody stop drinking caffeine. But when you hear about what caffeine does to the fetus, you might consider that maybe you should share this information. First of all, caffeine leads to low birth weight because of the developmental issues. It can lead to miscarriage. It can lead to stillbirth. It can lead to things after birth, including ADD, ADHD, and other physical development things because it didn't develop properly in the womb. Now, I bring this up. Why is this important? Because and obviously people that drink caffeine have healthy babies every day. So I'm not discounting that, okay? And I'm not arguing with anybody because there's no argument. It's the truth. However, what if because with the woman, caffeine also decreases blood flow to the uterus where the egg is. And so if you have a man and a woman that are trying to have a baby and they're both drinking caffeine and they're having a hard time conceiving, perhaps, and heavy on the perhaps, it is the caffeine. And so quit and see what happens. Okay.
Where does the medical field stand on caffeine and with the research that your life's passion about this? Do they side with doctors? I mean, even doctors. It's just interesting. I just got out of the hospital, and it was amusing to me because the first questions they ask in the curtained areas: Do you drink? Do you smoke? Or do you have drugs that you use recreationally? And they're obviously asking them for a question for a reason. But
Yeah.
then I'm in a room where there's a back door, and I see doctors and whatever going out for a quick smoke and coming back in. So people
Right.
will make up their minds, or whatever. But I was just curious on where the medical field stands on the role of caffeine in people's lives.
Well, the medical field has the same cognitive dissonance that everybody else has. And
That's a great word. What's that word mean?
that's right where I was going.
Okay.
Okay. Cognitive dissonance is we are all, every human has been programmed to believe certain things throughout their life. Now, this is laid down in the first 7 years of your life because you're in a theta brainwave. So when you're birth to 7, everything that's going in that you're seeing and you're hearing is going into your subconscious. Now, after that, you can reprogram your subconscious, but so we have this belief system, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up with an objective truth. Realize those are important words: objective truth,
Yeah.
that goes against what you believe, that what you've believed all of your life. And as we've seen in the last 5 years, people refuse to believe the truth sometime when it goes against their beliefs.
Mhm.
And so when you see a doctor, then you use the example of having a smoke. Okay, same difference. Caffeine. If they drink caffeine and they don't have the symptom that their patient has, it can't be the caffeine because it's not doing it to me. And so as I started, I published my book a little over 3 months ago, and I started to hand out copies to friends and family for free. I'm not charging them. and it's a $20 book. Okay, but this is here just some information for you. The first thing they say to me is, "You can't take my coffee away from me." And I'm like, I literally I'm laughing. I said, "I have no intention of taking anything from you because I can't, because you have free will and free won't." Now you go back. I'm getting to the medical community thing. Okay, so I didn't forget about the question.
No, you're too sharp for that.
Well, thank you. So what happens is that the doctors, the AMA, American Medical Association, I believe, and they say that 200 milligrams or less a day is okay for pregnant women to be drinking. Now, if you look at that, now they have not done any research on what the effects on the fetus are. Okay, they just haven't. They've ignored it. And why? Because they're all drinking coffee. Okay, I'm not being I'm going to say a bad word here. Okay, I'm not being an ass. Okay, kind of a bad word. Anyway, but you understand what I'm saying. The fact is that because they're all doing it, it's got to be okay. I have a meme that I share in my presentations. It's all the sheep. All the sheep are running off the edge of the cliff, and one sheep is black and he's off to the side. And there's another sheep and he's got this little bubble thing and he said, "Why are we following Mary?" And the guy behind him in a little bubble says, "Well, she's part of the herd and we need to follow her because that's where we're supposed to go." And here's the black sheep. He's not running off the edge. Okay. He's the rebel. He's the guy, and this goes back to I'm a self-sabotage guy, right? And so you are safe in the herd. And when you leave the herd, you're criticized, chastised, and often ostracized from society.
Mm.
So, and this has happened with caffeine. It happens with alcohol at time when you go to a bar. If you decide not to drink and you go into a bar and have a NA beer or a soda, the people there are going to look at you, and some of them are actually going to say, "Why aren't you drinking?" As if you are committing a sin or a crime. And it's the same with caffeine. It's the same with cigarettes. It's the same with weed. It's the same with recreational drugs.
What are some of the ingredients in caffeine that we might not recognize the words, but I definitely want to show on the screen what they are when I'm editing, of course. But um, when you're buying cigarettes, I often have friends that will, and you look on the package, and they're trying to warn you with all the large writing,
Yep.
grotesque pictures, etc. Um, I am, because I haven't drank it, I'm thinking about, the person out getting the coffee bean out of the field, and that must be what ends up in the cup. But what is it inside of a coffee, product-wise or ingredient-wise, that is is really causing such problems in people's lives, whether they're
It is,
seen or not?
well, the first one and most important is the caffeine.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a molecule. Okay. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you dress it up in coffee, tea, energy drink, soda, chocolate. Caffeine molecule is a caffeine molecule. Okay. And so, but then you have a lot of toxins in regular coffee has a lot of toxins in it because they have pesticides and herbicides. Because there's such a demand for coffee, they now have they plant them closer together, and so the insects are eating them more. Because originally caffeine was created by the coffee plant as a pesticide, a natural pesticide. It's actually bitter, so the bugs would eat it and they would say, "Oh, I don't like this. I'm going to move on." But then when they planted them so close together, they just ignored that, and so they started to eat them. So then they have to spray them with pesticides and herbicides. Coffee plants are the second most heavily sprayed commercial product in the world, and number one is cotton. We don't eat cotton. Okay, we do consume coffee. And so, and then you look at decaf. First of all, when you drink decaf coffee, 10 to 15% of is still caffeine. Okay, it's not 100%, but it's still there. But what they do is they use chemicals to take the caffeine out of the coffee. So the chemicals are in the decaf, right? And they're um, obviously they're not toxic to the point where if you drink a decaf coffee, you're going to get sick. But it's an accumulation over time.
Hmm.
And so your body accumulates this. Now, here's a question I'm just going to answer, and you may or may not have even had that on your list. What happens to the caffeine when they take it out of the beans for decaf coffee? That's a great question.
I was heading there eventually.
Were you? Okay. Because they sell it to the soda companies and the energy drink companies. Now, realize it has no documented health benefits at all. It just doesn't exist. And I'll touch this in a second.
Okay.
So it has no health benefits, and the actual taste is bitter because it's a pesticide. It's a natural pesticide. So that guy, that person, it says, I love the taste of caffeine. I love the taste of just dark, raw, heavy coffee. What part of the brain is speaking here? Is it the dopamine or is it the taste buds? My personal belief, here's my opinion. My personal belief that most of the time this is the dopamine. Because I'll tell you what, the dopamine is very powerful. And the dopamine is going to overcome that bitter taste because you feel good just thinking about it. Okay. And so you, you can give some, I can give people a dopamine rush to talking about a Folgers cup, Folgers in your cup commercial, right?
Funny.
The smell and the look. And so what was I going to get back to? Can you remind me?
We were talking about decaf, but I think it's
Oh,
a good time here. I want to take a break. If you're enjoying this episode, friends, we need to thank our sponsor of the episode today, Podmatch. Podmatch is a service we use here at SwagAbility to connect with incredible guests like who I have on today. Podmatch automatically matches podcast hosts with their perfect guest, making the entire process simple, smart, and incredibly effective. If you want to grow your message, expand your reach, or even start your own show, I would suggest signing up with Podmatch today. You can connect at joinpodmatch.com/swagability. That's joinpodmatch.com/swagability. And when you're there, tell them Swags sent you. Steve, let's talk about some of the everyday symptoms people have but don't realize that they're linked to caffeine. Can you
okay.
name some?
Sure. One is the one we talked about is that you have nervous energy and you don't know what to do with it and you don't know why. And then all of a sudden, when that goes away, you have brain fog and you have fatigue and you won't necessarily get a headache for 12 to 24 hours necessarily. It can happen. It can happen as soon as 4 hours. My daughter, who's trying to quit caffeine, forgot to drink coffee one day. 11:30 in the morning, had a screaming headache. Realized she hadn't had her coffee. Went and had a cup. 5 minutes later, no headache. Because there's only one thing that can stop an adenosine headache, and that is caffeine.
You've talked about its effect on babies and the fetus. Let's move to the teenage crowd for a few minutes, if we
Sure.
can. I'm thinking of when you sit outside of a gas bar when you're pumping fuel or whatever. Um, People coming up with one or two energy drinks, usually young people.
Yeah.
What does it? What would the amount of caffeine and things in that drink? What type of effects is it having on young people like that make it, are very vulnerable at that age?
Sure.
You're not thinking with your health head. You're
No.
thinking about how you feel.
Right. Well, one of the biggest things is development. Okay, in the mental and physical. You, if you're on adrenaline all the time, you may or may not gain weight. You may or may not go into pre-diabetes, okay, because of all that glucose. Because remember, every time you drink anything with caffeine in it, your blood sugar is going to go up, and that's not counting the sugar that's in the drink that you're drinking. Realize that if you go to Starbucks or any coffee house and you have one of their drinks, some of their drinks have as much sugar in them as you should have all day, and that's just one drink. But so then you look at the energy drink, and that has a caffeine content of anywhere from 120 to 200 to 300 milligrams of caffeine. But then it also has, and that's what's labeled. Okay, and it doesn't tell you that
Wow.
in the. I'm gonna give you some links, and there's a chart that has 1,000 different drinks in Canada and the United States of what's in there, so you can actually track them along with the trackability tracking tools that I provide. But so when you drink in the like the energy drinks in particular have different natural substances that have natural caffeine in them, which nobody talks about. Okay, so you might have 200 milligrams of caffeine. You may have another 20 to 50 to 100 milligrams of caffeine naturally in these other substances. Okay,
Mm.
so what happens then? They already are messed up because they're teenagers. You know that, and I say that with all respect. I have 4 kids. I have 8 grandchildren. I've been through a lot of teenage cycles. Okay, and so what happens? They're nervous, they're jittery, they're crabby. They're crabby when they come down. Okay, you think they're crabby before when they come off of that Red Bull rush or whatever Rockstar Monster. If you don't give them more caffeine, you probably shouldn't talk to them. And but then also it affects their brains, their development in their brains and their muscles. And realize that caffeine is a diuretic. And so whenever you drink caffeine, you need to go to the bathroom more often. Okay. So for lack of a better way, when you go and pee after you drink your caffeine, you aren't just peeing out water.
Mm.
You're peeing out a lot of minerals, specifically calcium and magnesium. And so now for teenagers, they need these minerals to grow, to develop into young adults. I'm going to go back to a woman here for a second because this is particularly affects women in postmenopause. Because if she's depleting her calcium and magnesium, she's going to get osteoporosis much faster than she would just naturally.
Wow.
Okay, but that was a tangent, but I had to throw it in there because it definitely affects, you
Sure.
know, the magnesium and the calcium definitely affect everybody. And so when you look back at the teenagers, you have these huge mood swings. You have I don't know if you're aware of this. The circadian rhythm of teenagers is 2 hours different than adults. Okay, so when they tell you at 10 o'clock at night that they're not tired, they're not lying.
Mm.
Okay, because their circadian rhythm, and that changes as they grow, as they get up to be adults. So now here you go. You've got a teenager that is supposed to go to bed at 10 and gets up at 6 to go to school. Can't go to sleep. Doesn't go to sleep till 11 or 11:30. It has to get up at 6 o'clock. Now, normally, you realize that circadian rhythm isn't about just when they go to sleep; it's also when they get up. And
Mm.
so, my grandson on the weekends sleeps till between 10 and noon, and during the week he gets up at 6:15. Okay, so what are teenagers looking for? They're looking for a boost because they're tired. In the states, the line around Starbucks is enormous the first thing in the morning with kids going to school. Those are the kids that can afford $5 to $10 for that drink. You know, the ones that aren't that wealthy are drinking Diet Cokes or they're drinking coffee at home or whatever the case. Again, I'm being a little facetious here,
Yeah.
but this is expensive. Okay,
Mm.
it's expensive to get wired.
We were talking about that in the intro there. Let's get right down to what you call taking the cuffs off. When it comes to quitting, uh, two questions. We'll start maybe with this one first. What is we could call it nervous system, like our central nervous system friendly exit strategy? What does that look like for someone who says, you know what, I'm not actually liking what I'm hearing, but this is going to be really difficult to get off. Is there a
Yep,
friendly way to exit?
absolutely, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I already told you the unfriendly way, and
Mm,
that's the cold turkey. So we won't go there anymore, and I don't recommend that. The friendly way is to use a tapering method or a replacement method, and we go through that in the book. We go through that in our coaching program. I go that through every podcast basically that I do, and that is what you do is there's two things. First one is you either are going to quit or you're not going to quit. You're not going to try to quit. If you try to quit, you will fail basically 100% of the time. And this wasn't, I started to talk about this because I do podcasts with recovered alcoholics, recovered drug addicts,
mhm.
okay? Because addiction is addiction at some point. They're different, okay? So don't
Yeah.
misunderstand me. But so, and they agree with me 100%. First thing you got to do is you got to say, I'm going to quit. The second thing is to have a plan. Because if you if you're winging this, you're going to fail, okay? Because life in general, when you wing it, you fail. And so you say to yourself, what's a user friendly way to do this, okay? So for 7 to 10 days or even 2 weeks, you take your pot of coffee that you brew at home and you put in 75% regular coffee and 25% decaf. Then after 7 to 14 days, then you go to 50-50. Then you go to 25-75. So now you could possibly be through a month out, maybe even a little bit longer, maybe month and a half. I don't care how long it takes you to quit. If you can quit, you're a rock star
Mm.
because you have now taken back your freedom. You're no longer tied. Those are the handcuffs. Those are the coffee cuffs. Because you don't wake up in the morning having to have anything to get you going because your natural body, your because our bodies are wonderfully and beautifully made. And God designed them that your cortisol goes up in the morning, you wake up, you've got energy. It's natural energy. I have a guy in one of my testimonials. He said, I quit 6 months ago. He was doing 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams a day. He now wakes up and he feels like he's had a double or triple shot of espresso, but it's natural. And so the best way to do it is to go just nice and slow, and that's user friendly as I can get. Okay,
There
but
must be a sorry to cut you off. There must be during this stage too, though. Like coffee is such a social thing, right? So I'm
yep,
thinking on top of cutting back, there. I mean, you're not gonna stop hanging out with friends because they're drinking coffee.
no,
I'm just trying to think about what are the ramifications of the social aspect of it. Must probably have to be taken into consideration as well.
yes, because the question isn't whether you want to hang out with them. The
Mm,
question is, do they want to hang out with you?
mm,
Because you are no longer part of the herd. Because the herd drinks coffee, the herd does weed, the herd smokes cigarettes, the herd whatever drinks alcohol, right? So part of the plan is you have to have a plan for when you are confronted by somebody. And this happened to me a couple of months ago. I was having breakfast with a good friend of mine, and the waitress comes up and she says, "Can I get you guys coffee?" He said, "Yep, I'll have a cup." And I said, "I'll have a decaf." And he slams his hands down on the table, literally gets a little bit across the table. He said, "Decaf?" I said, "Yeah, caffeine doesn't agree with me." And then a little while later, I looked at him and I said, "You do realize that about 8 or 9 out of 10 people that you would have said that to would have had a regular cup of coffee. Social peer pressure. So you have to have a plan. How are you going to address this?" And unfortunately, sometimes I don't have filters, right? Okay. And this may hurt me, it may help me, but at some point, you're going to lose some of these people because they will not accept you without caffeine.
Before I get to the last question, Steve, tell our listeners and followers about your products, where they can find them, and make contact with you or any of your coaching.
Okay. Everything is at releasethecoffeecuffs.com. That's KUFFS.com. It's a play on handcuffs. And in there you can buy the book there. You can look at all the coaching programs, and there's a lot of free stuff in there that you can get. I have a master class that talks about quitting caffeine. We just rolled out 3 completely new programs that are very affordable. There's a $99, $199, and $399, depending on what kind of support you want. And if you want support, you can get it, and it's not going to break the bank. If you just think about spending the $200 for it's a 4-week course which has 10 weeks of information in it, but you get 2 half-an-hour coaching sessions in there with me. If you go and drink a Starbucks or whatever, Tim Hortons coffee every day, you're spending that in 40 days or less, possibly 30.
Mhm. I just want to clarify, coffee cups. Is it a C or is it a K? Just
C.
for it's a C. Okay, so it's
Cuffs. Yep.
okay.
Release the coffee and then Cuffs. Thank you. That
Gotcha.
because they can't get there if they type in the wrong address. And
No,
I'll put a
absolutely,
link to that. I'll put the link into the show notes as well. But
absolutely.
but so and what you can do there is you can hit the contact page and send me a message, and I will respond to it. If you ask me, I will respond to it. And when you go in and watch the master class, you can actually sign up for a session, a discovery call, it's called, and we talk about what you might want out of this, and that's all free. So I'm offering a lot of things for free,
Mm.
which may help someone and support them on quitting caffeine.
Well, that's the whole desire of what swagability is, to bring information to inform, because our sole desire here is to make sure everyone is thriving wherever life finds them. So, Steve, I can't thank you enough for spending time. Insightful, practical, and thank you for sharing your personal journey with it. Last question for you. What did and does it feel like when you are completely caffeine free after being on it for many years?
I'm 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 using the silence for impact. Okay. It's
Life
amazing.
changing.
It
Yeah.
is amazing because you're free
Mm.
and you're not reliant on anything. You don't need that caffeine to make a decision to go and do something, and your body, you feel good, you're alert. You don't crash. So you're alert the whole time you're awake, you're alert. Where if you're on caffeine, you're alert when you go up, but you're not alert when you come down. Okay. So how do I feel? I feel amazing and I feel ready to conquer the world. And I'm 68. I want to do this in 50. I want to be doing this for 15 years. And if I take care of myself, I will be.
I have no doubts. Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure. Folks, if you've enjoyed this episode or enjoyed what we believe in here at Swagability, thriving where life finds you, do us a big favor. Would you subscribe to our channel? It certainly helps the algorithm, and give it a like. Comment in the comments what you'd like to talk about or hear talked about in upcoming shows. And visit swagability.com to find out a little bit more about my wife and I and our nonprofit here in Canada and the US.
Could I
And
could I
yeah,
bring one thing up?
go ahead.
And you
Yeah,
we talked about cognitive dissonance, okay?
yeah, yeah.
And you and I did a pre-interview a couple weeks ago, and you said something that struck me as a nugget of wisdom that I would like to share with your listeners. And this came from you, so I'm passing this along. And you said, and I'm going to paraphrase this because I don't exactly remember what you said, but it's pretty close. And you said, it takes a wise man to search for information when he knows that what he finds he isn't going to like.
Yeah,
I don't know if you remember saying that,
I
but
do.
it
But it's
struck me.
true.
It struck me incredibly because that is cognitive dissonance in a nutshell. And what you do is you look at this, and it goes all the way across life, right? It's not just caffeine,
Yeah.
but you have a lot of wisdom there, and I appreciate it. And I admire you for that.
Uh, just think to me, it's a biblical principle. The more I read into
Yep.
God's word, the more I
Right.
find out what I don't like about me. And so it takes a wise man to know what he already knows and
Yep.
then research it to let others know. So
Yes.
thank you just for being you and for being excited about it. It's not a doom and gloom message. It's here's information, here's what it's done for me,
Yep.
and choose now what you will. And we look forward to maybe a 2.0 down the road because I certainly want to know what's going on in your life. Steve, a pleasure as always, folks. The SwagAbility Show weekly. Until next time, stay encouraged, stay faithful, and keep thriving wherever life finds you. Swags out.